Ba, ba, ba. Hello. We're reading The Wrinkle in Time today. That's what we're reading. Reading The Wrinkle in Time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Reason 11. Da 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 da. Hello. We're reading The Wrinkle in Time today at Professor Fox's Cozy Corner. Now, this is The Man with Red Eyes. So we're reading The Man with Red Eyes, A Wrinkle in Time. We knew we were going to be in danger, Charles Wallace said. Hello. Miss Wussett told us that, yes, and she told us that it was going to be worse for you than Meg and me, and that you must be careful you stay right here with Meg, old sport, and let me go in case a joint and report to you. No, Charles Wallace said firmly. She told us to stay together. She told us not to go off by ourselves. She told you to not go off by yourself. I'm the oldest and I should go in first. No, Meg's voice was flat. Charles is right, Cal. We have to stay together. Suppose you didn't come out and we had to go in there after you. Come on, but let's hold hands if you don't mind. Holding hands, they crossed the square. The huge Central Intelligence building had only one door, but it was an enormous one, at least 2 stories high, and wilder than the room, made of dull, bronze-like material. Do we just knock? Meg giggled. Calvin studied the door. There isn't any handle or knob or latch or anything. Maybe there's another way to get in. Let's try knocking anyhow, Charles said, and he raised his head, but before he touched the door, it slid up from the top and each side splitting into 3 sections that had completely invisible at a moment before they started. The children looked into a great entrance hall of dull green marble. Marble benches lined 3 of the walls. People were sitting there like statues. The green of the marble reflecting on their faces made them look bilious. They turned their heads as the door opened, saw the children, looked away again. Come on, Charles said, and still holding hands, they stepped in. As they crossed the threshold, the door shut silently behind them. Meg looked at Calvin and Charles, and they looked like waiting people were a sickly green. The children went on to the blank floor. It seemed unsubstantial, as though one might almost be able to walk through it. Charles put on his hand. It's solid and icy cold. Calvin touched it too. Huh. Meg's left hand was held by Charles, her right hand by Calvin, and she had no desire to let go either of them to touch the wall. Let's ask somebody something. Charles led them over to one of the benches. Could you tell us what's the produce around here? He asked one of the men. The men all wore undescriptive business suits. And though the features were as different one form and the other as the features of men on earth, there was also a sameness to them. Like the sameness of people riding in a subway. Meg thought, only a subway every once in a while there's somebody different and there isn't here. The man looked at the children wearily. The procedure for what? What do we see whoever in authority? Charles asked. You present your papers to a machine. You ought to know that, the man said severely. Where is a machine? Calvin asked. The man pointed to the blank room. But there isn't a door or anything, Calvin said. How do we get in? You put your S papers in the B slot, the man said. Why are you asking me these stupid questions? Do you think I don't know the answers? You better not play any games around here or you'll have to go through the process machine again, and you don't want to do that. We're strangers here, Calvin said. That's why we don't know about things. Please tell us, sir, who are you and what do you do? I run a #1 spelling machine on the 2nd grade level. But what are you doing here now? Charles Wallace asked. I'm here to report that one of my letters is jamming, and until it can be properly oiled by an F-grade oiler, there's a danger of jam mines. Strawberry jam or raspberry, Charles Wallace murmured. Calvin looked down at Charles and shook his head warningly. Meg gave the little boy's hand a slight understanding pressure. Charles Wallace, she was quite sure, was not trying to be rude or funny. It was all his way of whistling in the dark. The man looked at Charles sharply. I think I shall have to report you. I'm fond of children due to the nature of my work, and I don't like to get them in trouble, but rather than run the risk of myself reprocessing, I must report you. Maybe that's a good idea, Charles said. Who do you report us to? To whom do I report to? Well, to whom, then? I'm not on the 2nd grade level yet. I wish he wouldn't act so sure of himself, Meg thought, looking anxiously at Charles, and holding his hand more tightly until he wiggled his fingers in protest. That's what Miss Whatsit said he had to watch, being proud. Please don't, she fought hard at Charles Wallace. She wondered if Calvin realized that a lot of the arrogance was bravado. The man stood up, moving jerkily, as though he had been sitting for a long time. I hope he isn't too hard on you, he murmured, as he led the children toward the empty 4th wall. But I've been reprocessed once, and that was more than enough. And I don't want to get sent to it. I've never been sent to it, and I can't risk having that happen. There was an it again? What was it? The man took from the pocket a folder filled with papers of every color. He shuffled through them carefully, finally withdrawing one. I've had several reports to make lately, and I shall have to ask for a requestion for more A21 cards. He took the card and put it again in the wall. It slid through the marble as though it was being sucked in and disappeared. You may be detained for a few days, the man said, but I'm sure they won't be too hard on you because of your youth. Just relax and don't fight, and I will all be much easier for it. And he went back to his seat, leaving the children standing and staring at the blank wall. And suddenly the wall was no longer there, and they were looking into an enormous room lined with machines. They were not unlike the great computing machines Meg had seen in her science books. Thank you. Yes, thank you for liking my hat. She knew her father sometimes worked with some did not seem to be in use. And others, thank you for the gifts. I appreciate you. Others' light were flickering on and off. In one machine, a long tape was being eaten. And another, a series of dot dashes were being punched. Several white-robed attendants were moving about, tending a machine. If they saw... Oh, thank you for completing my goal of corn. That's very thoughtful of you. Calvin... Opinion on Braylon? I don't know.
You got a guy spamming you and you don't have any to have him.
Oh, here, I have. I got you. We're reading A Wrinkle in Time. We're reading it. Oh, opinion on SpongeBob? I don't have an opinion on SpongeBob. All right, we'll get back to the book. We'll get back to the book. But we're reading A Wrinkle in Time. He wears square pants, yeah. He does wear square pants. Alright. Meg, clasping his small hand tightly, could feel if sweating hers. As they approached the end of the room, their steps stowed. Before them was a platform. On the platform was a chair, and on the chair was a man. What was there about him that seemed to contain all the coldness and darkness they had felt as they plunged through the black thing on their way to this planet. "I've been waiting for you, my dears," the man said. His voice was kind and gentle, not at all the cold and frightening voice Meg had suspected. It took her a moment. He had not opened his mouth or moved his lips at all. Not no real words that had been spoken to fall upon his ears, that he had somehow communicated directly into their brains. "But how does it happen that there were 3 of you?" the man asked. Charles Wallace spoke with harsh boldness, but Meg could feel him trembling. "Oh, Calvin, just come along for the ride." "Oh, he did. For a moment there was a sharpness to the voice that spoke inside their minds. Then it relaxed and became soothing again. "I hope that it has been a pleasant one so far." "Very educational," Charles Wallace said. "Let Calvin speak for himself," the man ordered. Calvin growled, his lips tight, his body rigid. "I have nothing to say." Meg stared at the man in horrified fascination. His eyes were bright and had a reddish glow. Above his head was a light, and it glowed the same manner as the eyes, pulsing, throbbing in steady rhythm. Charles Wallace shut his eyes tightly. "Close your eyes," he said to Meg and Calvin. "Don't look at the light. Don't look at his eyes. He'll hypnotize you." "Oh my. Clever, aren't you?" "Focusing your eyes would of course help." The soothing voices went on. "But there were other ways, my little man. Oh yes, there are other ways. If you try it on me, I shall kick you," Charles Wallace said. It was the first time Meg had ever heard Charles Wallace suggesting violence. "Oh, well, you indeed, my little man." That thought was torrent. Amused, but 4 men in dark smocks appeared and flanked the children. "Now, my dears, the world's continue. I shall, of course, have no need of recourse to violence. But I thought perhaps it would save you pain if I showed you at once that I would do you no good to try to oppose me. You see, what you will soon realize is that there are no need to fight me. Not only is there no need, but you will have the slightest desire to do so. For why should you wish to fight someone who is here only to save your pain and trouble?" We're about to start the book, Bitter Fruit. Ooh, Bitter Fruit. I haven't read Bitter Fruit at all. Yeah. Is that a classic or is that a new book? "We will make our own decisions, thank you," Charles Wallace said. "But of course, and our decisions will be one, yours and mine. Don't you see how much better, how much easier? For you, that is. Let me show you. Let me show the manipulation table together." "No," Charles Wallace said. "Once 1 is 1. Once 2 is 2. Once 3 is 3. Murry had a little lamb," Charles Wallace shouted. "Its fleece was white as snow. Once 4 is 4. Once 5 is 5. Once 6 is 6. Anywhere that Murry went, the lamb is sure to go. Once 7 is 7. Once 8 is 1. Once 9 is 9. Peter, pumpkin eater, had a wife, he couldn't keep her. Once 10 is 10. Once 11 is 11. Once 12 is 12. The number of words pounded intensely against Meg's brain. They seemed to be boring their way into her skull. Twice 1 is 2. Twice 2 is 4. Twice 3 is 6. Calvin's voice came out in an angry shout. 70 years ago, and our fathers brought forth on the continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated into the proposition that all men are created equal. Twice 4 is 8. Twice 5 is 10. Twice 6 is 12. Father, Meg screamed. Father! The scream, half involuntary, jerked her mind back out of the darkness. The words of the multiplication table seemed to break up into laughter. Splendid, you have passed your preliminary test with flying colors. You didn't think we were as easy as all that, falling in that old stuff, did you? Charles Wallace demanded. I hope not. I must certainly hope not. But after all, you are very young and very unresponsible. And you're younger the better, my little man. The younger the better. Meg looked up at the fiery eyes, at the light pulsing above them, and then away. She tried looking at the mouth, at the thin, almost colorless lips. And this was the most possible, even though she had to look undoubtedly that she was not sure exactly what the face really looked like, whether it was young or old or cruel or kind or human or an alien. If you please, she said, trying to sound calm and brave, the only reason we are here is because we think our father is here. Can you tell us where to find him? Ah, your father. There seemed to be a great colorting of delight. Ah, yes, your father is not a can. I know, young lady, but I will. Will you then? That depends on a number of things. What do you want your father? Didn't you even have a father yourself, Meg demanded. You don't want him for a reason. You want him because he's your father. Ah, but he hasn't been acting very like a father lately, has he? Abandoning his wife and his 4 little children to go gallivanting off on the wild adventure of his own? He was working for the government. He never had left us otherwise. And we want to see him, please, right now. My, but the little miss impatient. Patience, young lady. Meg did not tell the man on the chair that patience was not one of her virtues. And by the way, my children, he continued blandly, you don't need to vocalize verbally with me. You know, I can understand you quite as well as you can understand me. Charles Wallace put his hands on his hip defiantly. The spoken word is one of the triumphs of man, he proclaimed, and I intend to continue using it, particularly with people I don't trust. But this voice was shaking Charles Wallace, who, even as an infant, had seldom cried was never near tears. And you don't trust me? What reason have you given us to trust you? What cause have you given us for distrust? The lips curled slightly. Suddenly, Charles Wallace darted forward and hit the man as hard as he could, which was fairly hard, as he had a good deal of coaching from the twins. Charles, Meg screamed. The man in the dark smocks moved softly with swiftness to Charles. The man in the chair casually raised one finger, and the man dropped back. Hold on, Calvin whispered, and continued together, by which Meg darted forward and grabbed Charles Wallace, pulling him back from the platform. The man gave a wince, and he thought of his voice was a little breathless, as though Charles Wallace punch had succeeded in winding him. May I ask why you did that? Because you aren't you, Charles Wallace said. I'm not sure what you are, but you, he pointed to the man on the chair, aren't what's talking to us. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I didn't think you were real. I thought perhaps you were a robot because I don't feel anything coming directly from you. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but it's coming through you. It isn't you. Pretty smart, aren't you? That Futt asked. And Meg had an uncomfortable feeling that she dedicated a snarl. It's not that I'm smart, Charles said. And again, Meg could feel the palm of his hand sweating inside hers. Try to find out who I am, then, the thought probed. I have been trying, Charles Wallace said, his voice high and troubled. Look into my eyes, look deep within them, and I will tell you. Charles Wallace looked quickly at Meg and Calvin and said, as though to himself, I have to. And he focused his clear blue eyes on the red ones of the man in the chair. Meg looked out at the man, but at her brother. After a moment, it seemed that his eyes were no longer focusing. The pupils grew smaller and smaller, as though he were looking into an insanely bright light, until they seemed to close entirely, until his eyes were nothing but an opaque blue. He slipped his hands out of Meg's and Calvin's and started walking slowly toward the man on the chair. No! Meg screamed. No! But Charles Wallace continued his slow walk forward, and she knew that he had not heard her. No, she screamed again and ran after him. With her infinite flying shackle, she landed on him. She was so much larger than he, and he fell, sprawling, hitting his head on a sharp crack against the marble floor. She knelt by him, sobbing. After a moment of lying there as though he had been knocked out by the blow, he opened his eyes, shook his head, and sat up slowly. The pupils of his eyes dilated until they were back to normal, and the blood came back to his white cheeks. The man on the chair spoke directly to Meg's mind, and now there was a distant menace to the words. I am not pleased, he said to her. I could very easily lose patience with you, and that, for your information, young lady, would not be good for your father. If you have the slightest desire to see your father again, you had better cooperate. Meg reacted as she sometimes reacted to Mr. Jenkins at school. She scowled down at the ground in sullen fury. It might help if you give us something to eat, she complained. We're all starving. If you're going to be horrible to us, you might as well give us full stomachs first. Again, the thoughts coming at her broke into her laughter. Isn't she the funny girl, though? It's lucky for you that they amuse me, my dear, or I shouldn't be so easy on you. The boys I find not nearly so diverting. Oh, well, now tell me, young lady, if I feed you well, you stop interfering with me? No, Meg said. Starvation does work wonders, of course. The man told her. I hate to use primitive methods on you, but of course you realize that you're forced on me. I wouldn't eat your old food anyhow. Meg was still at all crunched up and angry as though she were in Mr. Jenkins' office. I wouldn't trust it. Of course our food, being synthetic, is not superior to the messes of beans and bacon or so forth, but I assure you that it is far more nourishing, and though it has no taste or of its own, its slight conditioning is all that is necessary to give you the illusion that you are eating a roast turkey dinner. If I ate now, I'd throw it up anyhow, Meg said, still holding Calvin's hand. Charles Wallace stepped forward. Okay, what's next? He asked the man on the chair. We've had enough of this preliminaries. Let's get on with it. That's exactly what we're doing, the man said. Until your sister interfered by practically giving you a brain concussion, shall we try again? No, Meg cried. No, Charles, please. Let me do it. Or Calvin. But it is only the little boy whose neurological system is complex enough. If you tried to conduct the necessary neurons, your brains would explode. That's interesting. Let's go down. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's a wrinkle in time. All right, here we go. But there's a possibility. There's always a possibility. Then it must do it. I think you will have to grant me the right to make his own decisions. But Meg, with the dodge tendency that had so often caused her trouble, continued, You mean Calvin? And I couldn't know how you really are? Oh, no, I didn't say that. You can't know it in some way, nor it is important to me to have you known. Ah, here we are. From somewhere in the shadows appeared 4 men in the dark smocks, carrying a table. It was covered with a white cloth, like the tables used by room service in hotels, and held a metal hot box containing something that smelled delicious, something that smelled like turkey dinner. There's something funny in the whole system, Meg thought. There is definitely something rotten in the state of Camazotz. Again, the thought seemed to break into laughter. Of course, it doesn't really smell, but it isn't as good as though it really did. I don't smell anything, Charles Wallace said. I know, young man, and I think how much you're missing. This will all taste to you as though you were eating sand, but I suggest that you force it down. I would rather not have your decisions come from the weakness of an empty stomach. The table was set up in front of them, and the dark, smug man heaped their plates with turkey and dressing, and mashed potatoes and gravy and the little green beans, with big yellow blobs of butter melting in them, and cranberries and sweet potatoes topped with gooey brown marshmallows and olives and celery and rosebud radishes, and Meg felt her stomach rumbling loudly. The saliva came to her mouth. Oh, Jiminy, Calvin nodded. Chairs appeared, and the 4 men who had provided the feast slid back into the shadows. Oh, thank you for that. Charles Wallace fed his hands with Meg and Calvin and plunked himself down on one of the chairs. Come on, he said. If it's poison, it's poison, but I don't think it is. Calvin sat down. Meg continued to stand indecisively. Calvin took a bite. He chewed and he swallowed. He looked at Meg. If this isn't real, it's the best imitation you'll ever get. Charles Wallace took a bite, made a face, and spit out his mouthful. It's unfair, he shouted at the man. Laughter again. Go on, little fellow, eat. Meg sighed and sat. I don't think we should eat this stuff, but if you're going to, I better too. She took a mouthful and it tastes all right. Taste some of mine, Charles said. Felled out a forkful of turkey. Charles Wallace took it and made another face, but managed to swallow. Still tastes like sand, he said. He looked at the man. Why? You know perfectly well why. You shut your mind entirely to me. The other 2 can't. I can get in through the chinks. Not all the way in, but enough to give them a turkey dinner. You see, I'm really just a kind of jolly old gentleman. Ha, Charles said. The man lifted his lips into a smile, and his smile was the most horrible thing Meg had ever seen. Why don't you trust me, Charles? Why don't you trust me enough to come in and find out what I am? I am peace and utter rest. I am freedom from all responsibility. To come in to me is the last difficult decision you ever need to make. If I come in, can I get out again? Charles Wallace asked. But of course if you want to, but I don't think you will want to. If I come, not to stay, you understand, just to find out about you, will you tell us where the father is? Yes, that is a promise, and I don't make promises lightly. Can I speak to Meg and Calvin alone without your listening in? No, Charles shrugged. He said to Meg. And Calvin, I have to find out what he really is. You know that. I'm going to try to hold back. I'm going to try to keep part of myself out. You must stop me this time. You mustn't stop me this time, Meg. But you won't be able to, Charles. He's stronger than you are. You know that. I have to try. But Miss Whatsit warned you. I have to try for father, Meg, please. I want to know my father. For a moment, his lips trembled, and he was back in control. But it wasn't only father, Meg. You know that now. It's the black thing. We have to do what Miss Witch sent us to do, Calvin, Meg begged. But Calvin shook his head. He's right, Meg, and we'll be with him, no matter what happens. But what's going to happen, Meg cried. Charles Wallace looked up at the man. Okay, he said, let's go. Now the red eyes and the light above seemed to bore into Charles again. The pupils on the little boy's eyes contracted with the final part of black was lost in blue, and he turned away from the red eyes, looked at Meg, and smiled sweetly, but the smile was not Charles Wallace's smile. Come on, Meg, eat the delicious food that has been prepared for us, he said. Meg snatched Charles Wallace's plate and threw it on the floor so that the dinner splashed about, and the plate broke into fragments. No, she cried, her voice raising shrilly. No, no, no! From the shadows came out of the dark smock men and put another plate in front of Charles Wallace, and they began to eat eagerly. What's wrong, Meg? Charles Wallace asked. Why are you being so belligerent and uncooperative? The voice was Charles Wallace's voice, and yet it was different too, somehow flattened out, almost as a voice might have sounded on the two-dimensional planet. Meg grabbed wildly at Calvin, shrieking, That isn't Charles! Charles is gone. All right. A lot has happened. So we are reading The Wrinkle in Time. It's your classic story about good versus evil. And it's also a story about youth development. This is your typical young protagonist. Maybe the forefather to Harry Potter. The forefather to... I get a little bit of Doctor Who with this story. It's got Doctor Who in it. It's definitely one of those very typical, classic young adult stories of good versus evil. Very along the lines of we have a young protagonist, such as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Very similar book. And then another one of my favorites, very similar to The Wizard of Oz. Same type of idea, same type of landscape. Instead of a naughty wizard and a witch, this one has a thing and an it. Good versus evil. Pretty interesting book. One of the first science fiction. It has a lot of science fiction in it with the whole Tesseract. The whole purpose of the Wrinkle in Time is you have the first dimension, the second dimension, and you have the third dimension, and then you have the fourth dimension. The fifth dimension is that wrinkle in time in which they are able to pass through to travel to these different worlds, and this is where we're at. We're in one of those worlds that they feel like their father is in. Let's set up a new goal. Let's do... This book came out in, I believe, 1962. I'm going to look it up for you. Yeah. So it's copyrighted in 1962. So same time frame that we have as The Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz and Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. A young protagonist trying to find her way in the world. And also it has that whole rebelling against society, a little bit of that. Maybe this is the inspiration to Hunger Games, the inspiration to Divergent. This is that classic story of defiance in young adults. Standing up for what you know is right. My child right now is doing a lot of that when you're in adolescence and you're in, going into middle school. That's when you're trying to find yourself, and that's what this book is all about. Finding out what you're going to do, what is right. So you can get Wrinkle of Time from Brooks and Mortar right now for $5.40. That's pretty exciting. And then also at Books and Mortars, you can get another predecessor to this book, which is The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Another Professor Fox recommends that book as well. That's a very good, great classic. You've put the Naughty Chicken on there. The Naughty Chicken. And then if you're looking for a new book that's similar to what we're reading is How I Magically Messed Up My Life in 4 freaking days. 4 freaking days. So this is like the same thing, the same type of story. We have a young protagonist. He burns down his mom's theater, and this is very, like, Megan Russell does a really good job. This is like Harry Potter in New York. I really enjoyed this book. You should check this one out, too. But, yeah. This is a pretty typical archetype of young adult fiction. Classic young adult fiction is done in this way of the good versus evil. Look at it as a way, I feel like it's a way of, they were trying to teach us morality. You even see it in Tolkien. We are going to be reading The Hobbit next, and we'll go into some history about The Hobbit. That was the bedtime story that he told his kids, was The Hobbit. And then he kind of just put it into all his histories and stuff. But Tolkien was a very good friend of C.S. Lewis. So you'll see some familiarities there. Except Tolkien does more of the adult. But still was The Hobbit meant for children. Same with The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz was originally a fantasy book written for children as well. Very nice. But we will continue. The Transparent Column is what's next. We're going to read this chapter. The Transparent Column. Charles Wallace sat there tucking away turkey and dressing as though it were the most delicious thing he ever tasted. He was dressed like Charles Wallace. He looked like Charles Wallace. He had the same shady brown hair, the same face that had not yet lost his baby roundness. Only eyes were different, for the black was still swallowed up in blue. But it was far more than this has made. Thank you for helping me achieve my goal. Meg felt that Charles Wallace was gone. That little boy in his place was only a copy of Charles Wallace, only a doll. She fought down and sobbed. Where is he? She demanded of the man with red eyes. What have you done with him? Where is Charles Wallace? But my dear child, you are hysterical, the man fought at her. He is right there before you, well and happy, completely well and happy for the first time in his life. And he is finishing his dinner, which you also would be wise to do. You know it isn't Charles, Meg shouted. You've got him somehow. Hush, Meg. There's no use trying to talk to him, Calvin said, speaking in a low voice into her ear. What have we to do is hold Charles Wallace tight. He's there somewhere underneath, and he must have let him take him away from us. Help me hold him. Meg, don't lose control of yourself. Not now. You've got to help me hold Charles. He took the little boy firmly by one arm. Fighting down her hysteria, Meg took Charles Wallace's other arm and held him tightly. You're hurting me, Meg, Charles said sharply. Let me go! No, Meg said grimly. We've been all wrong, Charles Wallace's voice. Meg thought might have been recording. There was a canned quality to it. He isn't an enemy at all. He's our friend. Nuts, Calvin said rudely. You don't understand, Calvin. Charles Wallace said, Miss Wussett, Miss Who, and Miss Witch have confused us. They're the ones who are really our enemies. We never should have trusted them for a minute. He spoke in his calmest, most rational voice, the voice which infuriated the twins. He seemed to be looking directly at Calvin as he spoke, and yet Meg was sure that the bland blue eyes could not see, and that something else was looking into Calvin through Charles. Now the cold, strange eyes turned to her. Meg, let go. I will explain it all to you, but you must let go. No, Meg gritted her teeth. She did not release her grasp, and Charles Wallace began to pull away with a power that was not his own, and her own splendid strength was not matched against it. Calvin, she grasped as Charles Wallace wrenched his arm from her and stood up. Calvin, the athlete. Calvin, the boy who split firewood and brought it to his mother, whose muscles were strong and controlled, let go of Charles Wallace's wrist and tackled him as though he was a football. Meg, in her panic and rage, darted at the man on the chair, intending to hit him as Charles Wallace had done, but the black smoke men were too quick for her, and one of them held her with their arms, pinned her behind her back. Calvin, I advise you to let him go, came Charles Wallace's voice from under Calvin. Calvin, his face screwed up with grim determination, did not relax his hold. The man with the red eyes nodded, and three of the men moved to Calvin. At least it looked like three of them. Peered him loose and held him as Meg was beginning held. Miss Whatsit. Hello, Austin. Miss Whatsit, Meg called desperately. Oh, Miss Whatsit, but Miss Whatsit did come. Meg, Charles Wallace said, Meg, just listen to me. Okay, I'm listening. We've been all wrong. I told you, we haven't understood. We've been fighting our friend and Father's friend. If Father tells me he's our friend, maybe I'll believe it. Maybe, unless he's got Father under a control spell or whatever it is, like you. This isn't a fairy tale spell indeed, Charles Wallace said. Meg, you got to stop fighting and relax. Relax and be happy. Oh, Meg, if you just relax, you realize that all our troubles are over. You don't understand what a wonderful place we've come to. You see, on this planet, everything is perfect order. Because everybody has learned to relax, to give in, or to submit. All you have to do is look quietly and steadily into the eyes of the good friend here. For he is our friend, dear sister, and he will take you in as he has taken me. Taken you in its right, Meg said. You know you're not you. You know you're never in your life called me dear sister. Shut up a minute, Meg, Calvin whispered in her. He looked up at the man with the red eyes. Okay, have your henchmen let us go, and stop talking to us, though, Charles. We know it's you talking, or whatever talking for you. Anyhow, we know you have Charles hypnotized. A most primitive way of putting it, the man with the red eyes murmured. He gestured slightly with one finger, and Meg and Calvin were released. Thanks, Calvin said wearily. Now, if you are our friend, will you tell us who or what you are? It is not necessary for you to know who I am. I am the Prime Coordinator. That is all you need to know. But you've been spoken through into you, just like Charles Wallace. Are you hypnotized too? He's the Prime Micromanager. It is you who are going to take us to Miss Murry. No, it is not necessary, nor is it possible for me to leave you here. Charles Wallace will conduct you. Charles Wallace, yes. When? How? Now? The man with red eyes made the frightening grimace that passed for a smile. Yes, I think it might as well be now. Charles Wallace gave a slight jerk of his head. Something came and started to walk in a strange, guiding, mechanical manner. Calvin followed him. Meg hesitated, looking from the man with red eyes, and Charles said Calvin. She wanted to reach out and grab Calvin hand, but it seemed not ever since they had begun their journeys she had been looking for a hand to hold on to. So she stuffed her fists into her pockets and walked away behind the two boys. I've got to be brave, she said to herself. I will be. They moved down a long, white, and seemingly endless corridor. Charles Wallace continued to jerk rhythmically of his walk and did not once look back to see if they were him. Suddenly Meg broke into a run and caught up with Calvin. Cal, she said, listening quickly. Remember, Miss Wallace said your gift was communication, and that was what she was giving you? We've been trying to fight Charles physically, and that isn't any good. Can you try to communicate with him? Can't you try to get to him? Golly day, you're right. Calvin's face lit up with a hope in his eyes, which had been somber, regaining their usual sparkle. I've been in such a sweat. It may not do any good, but at least I can try. They quickened their pace until they were level with Charles Wallace. Calvin reached out for his arm, but Charles flung it off. Leave me alone, he snarled. I'm not going to hurt you, old sport, Calvin said. I'm just trying to be friendly. Let's make it up, huh? You mean you're coming around, Charles Wallace asked. Sure, Calvin's voice was coaxing. We're reasonable people after all. Just look at me for a minute. Charles Wallace stopped and turned slowly to look at Calvin with his cold, vacant eyes. Calvin looked back, and Meg could feel the intensity of his concentration. An enormous shudder shook Charles Wallace. For a brief flash, his eyes seemed to see. His whole body twirled wildly in white ridge. He started to his Marionette walk again. I should have known better, he said. If you want to see Murry, you better come with me and not try any more hanky-panky. Is that what you call your father, Murry? Hanky-panky. What does hanky-panky mean? Calvin asked Meg, could you see what he was angry and upset is near successful? Father, what is father? Charles Wallace intoned. Merely another misconception of you feel need of the father, and I would suggest that you turn to it. It, again. Who is this it? Meg asked. All in good time, Charles Wallace said. You're not ready for it yet. First of all, well, I'll tell you something about the beautiful Enlightenment planet of Camazotz. His voice took on the dry, penitent tones of Miss Jenkins. Perhaps you do not realize that our Camazotz, we have conquered all illness, all deformity. We, Calvin interrupted. Charles continued as though he had not heard. And of course he hadn't. Meg fought. We let no one suffer. It is now so much kinder simple to annihilate anyone who is ill. Nobody has weeks and weeks of running noses and sore throats. Rather than enduring some discomfort, they are simply put to sleep. You mean they're put to sleep while they have a cold, or they're unalived? Calvin demanded. Unalive is so much primitive word, Charles Wallace said. There is no such thing as unaliving on Camazotz. It takes care of all such things. He's moved jerkily to the wall of the corridor, stood still for a moment, and then grounded against his ears. And then raised his hand. The wall flickered, quivering, grew transparent. Charles Wallace walked through it, blinking out to Meg and Calvin. They followed. There was a small square room which radiated a dull, sumptuous light. There was something ominous to Meg in the very compactness of the room, as though the walls, the ceilings, the floor might move together and crush anybody rash enough to enter. How do you do that? Calvin asked Charles. Do what? Make the wall open like that. I'm merely a rearrangement of the atoms, Charles Wallace said loftily. You studied atoms in school, haven't you? Sure, but then you know enough to know that matter isn't solid, don't you? That you, Calvin, consists mostly of empty space. That if all the matter in you came together, that you'd be the size of a head of a pin. That's plain scientific fact, isn't it? Yes, but I simply pushed the atoms aside and we walked through the space between them. Meg's stomach seemed to drop, and she realized that the square box in which she stood must be an elevator that they had started to move upward with great speed. The yellow light lit up their faces, and the pale blue of Charles' eyes absorbed the yellow and turned green. Calvin licked his lips. Where are we going? Up, Charles continued his lecture. On, Camazotz. We are all happy because you are all alike. Different great peoples. You know that, don't you, dear sister? No, Meg said. Oh, yes, you do. You've seen how true it is. You know that the reason you're not happy at school because you're different. I'm different and I'm happy, Calvin said, but you pretend that you aren't different. I'm different and I like being different, Calvin's voice was unnaturally loud. Maybe I don't like being different, Meg said, but I don't want to be like everybody else either. Charles Wallace raised his hand and the motion of the square box ceased and one of the walls seemed to disappear. Charles stepped out. Meg and Calvin followed him, Calvin just barely making it before the wall came into being again, and they could no longer see where the opening had been. You wanted Calvin to get left behind, didn't you? Meg said. I'm merely trying to teach you to stay on your toes. I warn you, if I have any more trouble from either of you, I shall have to take you to it. As the word it fell from Charles' lips again, Meg felt as though she had been touched by something slimly horrible. So what is this it? She asked. You might call it the boss. Then Charles Wallace giggled, a giggle that was the most sinister sound they had ever heard. It sometimes calls itself the happiest, saddest. Meg spoke coldly for a cover of fear. I don't know what you're talking about. That's saddest, not saddest. You know, Charles Wallace said and giggled in. Lots of people don't pronounce it correctly. Well, I don't care, Meg said definitely. I don't. You ever want to see it, and that's what? Charles Wallace's strange, monotone voice grounded against hers. Meg, you're supposed to have some mind. Why do you think we have wars at home? Why do you think people get confused and unhappy? Because they all live their own separate individual lives. I've been trying to explain to you in the simplest possible way that Camazotz individuals have been done away with. Camazotz is one mind. It's it, and that's why everybody's so happy and efficient. That's why old witches like Miss Whatsit don't want to have happy at home. She's not a witch, Meg interrupted. No, Calvin son. You know she's not. You know that's just their game. That's way maybe of laughing in the dark. In the dark is correct, Charles continued. They want us to go on being confused instead of properly organized. Meg shook her head violently. No, she shouted. I know our world isn't perfect, Charles, but it's better than this. This isn't the only alternative. It can't be nobody suffers here. Charles intoned. Nobody is ever unhappy, but nobody's ever happy either. Meg said earnestly, maybe if you are unhappy, sometimes you don't know what to be happy, Calvin. I want to go home. We can't leave, Charles, Calvin told her, and we can't go before we found your father. You know that. But you're right, Meg, and Miss Witch is right. This is evil. Charles Wallace shook his head, and scorn and disapproval seemed to emanate from him. Come, we're wasting time. He moved rapidly down the corridor, but continued to speak. How dreadful is it to be low individual organism? Tick, 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 tick. His pace quickened from step to step, his short legs flashing so that Meg and Calvin almost had to run to keep up with him. Now, see this, he said. He raised his hand, and suddenly they could see through one of the walls into a small room. In the room, a little boy was bouncing a ball. He was bouncing in rhythm, and the walls of the little ceiling seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the ball. And each time the ball bounced, it screamed as though he were in pain. That's the little boy we saw this afternoon, Calvin said sharply. The little boy wasn't bouncing the ball like the others, Charles Wallace giggled again. Yes, every once in a while there's a little trouble with cooperation, but it's easily taken care of. After day, he will never desire to deviate again. Ah, here we are. He moved rapidly down the corridor and again held up his hand to make the wall transparent. They walked into another small room for a cell. In the center of it was a large, round, transparent column. Inside this column was a man. Father! Meg screamed. So they found their father. The next chapter, we get to find out what it is. So, let me see here. There's my card. So yeah, this is it is a very familiar story. So this is like, I feel like it's like a Doctor Who's episode. If you ever watched Doctor Who, I think this was before Doctor Who. In 1962, I don't think any Doctor Who episodes were airing at that time. It has a little bit of a Harry Potter trope to it, where we have the trio of children that were guided by mysterious forces on this little quest to save their father from this evil entity. It's an evil entity that is, well, it's claimed to be from the witches, that they so call it, Miss What's, Miss Who, and Miss Whatsit, that this evil entity is engulfing the earth with its darkness. And simply put, if you look at it in like a metaphor way, it's telling you that it's going to reform people into, like a sheepish type society, and reform them into, you will feel no pain, you're all going to live in like these suburbs, and you're all going to be the same, and then there will be no problems in the world, because if we're all the same, there won't be any problems. So that's the ideal of it, and I think that's the overall fear that the author is showing to us, and what is evil is. And I hope you have a lovely night too, Jessica. Overall evil in it is, it's okay to have different thoughts. It's okay to speak your mind. It's okay to have your own idea of things. And this place that they're describing is everything is the same and everybody's doing the same thing. And that is exactly what Meg at the beginning of the book is rebelling against in school. But this is a quest to find her father, and she has finally found her father. So next time we will see where that story goes. But thank you guys for showing up. This was a very late night for me. Hope you enjoyed A Wrinkle in Time. One more time, I'll kind of describe some of these other books for you. A Wrinkle in Time is a fantasy and science fiction story. And it has, this I believe is that guy that the red eyes. This was one of the witches or one of the Miss What's, Miss Who. And they were on a journey to find her father that was missing. So at the beginning of the book, there's a big storm. Her father is missing. He's been missing for some time. Meg is having trouble in school. Charles Wallace is a kid that has these like premonitions. I wouldn't say he's like clairvoyant or anything, but he knows things that a young kid shouldn't know. He's overly smart for his age, but also weird in his own way. They both get picked on in school. They meet Calvin, who's a popular boy. And then they start meeting Miss What's-It, Miss Who, and Miss Witch. And they take them on this journey to find their father. But they tell them that nobody will remember that they're gone because they're going to be in a wrinkle in time. So, like, for them, it'll only be 5 minutes may have passed. But if they don't succeed, the whole world is just going to fall into this nothingness and what we see on this other planet of where this it is in control, where everybody is like basically robots and automatrons. So they have this quest to overcome this evil. Now the evil is making them question, is this evil? Is this not evil? You know, they have wiped out disease. They have wiped out any wars because everyone's the same. But we will find out, if everybody's the same, then we don't advance. We don't have any art. We don't have any fought for ourselves, and that is a dangerous thing. Very unique story. I like it. It's fantasy and science fiction together. Another similar story with young protagonists is The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. This also has a group of 3 individuals, protagonists, that go into Narnia and have to fight an evil witch for survival of a realm. Wizard of Oz, another classic that's very similar to this book. This one, you're on Dorothy's journey to get back home. That's her only thing to do, is she wants to get back home. She wants to get back to Kansas. But it's another very similar type of story of a young adult fiction in the classics. Very nice story, and also about good versus evil. And then we have our modern book. This is How I Magically Messed Up My Life. And How I Magically Messed Up My Life in 4 freaking days by Megan O. Russell. This is Harry Potter in New York. He gets all his magical abilities from a cell phone. He burns down his mom's theater. Very interesting book that takes place in New York. So check out those books. Yeah. So any questions about Wrinkle in Time? I'll show you, before I leave, I'm going to show you the whole explanation of the Wrinkle in Time. This is why I call this book fantasy and science fiction, because it has a lot of science to it. It has string theory in it, actually, which is kind of cool. There. There it is. So, you see on that picture, there's an ant, right? This is how they travel between worlds. There's an ant. If the ant would go all the way to the other side with its little body, it would take a long time to get to the other hand. But if you fold the string, the ant can get there almost instantly. And that is the way they travel in this book. So then they describe, you have the first dimension, you have the fourth dimension. This is 3 dimensions. And then they talk about the fifth dimension is how they travel, which is that wrinkle in time, when you're folding space and time together and to get to other places. And that's what Miss Witch, Miss Who, and Miss What's-It can do. This other entity with the red eyes claims they're witches and they're evil, but they're saying he's evil. So that's where the thick of the book, what is real, what is not. Why is her dad in prison? So yeah. Any questions about The Wrinkle in Time? I like this book. It definitely gives me like the Doctor Who vibes to it. We will be able to finish this on our next live, so look forward to that. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. Thank you for all coming out. I'm going to get some sleep. I made it to 10K. That's even better. I really appreciate everybody that came out and gave the gifts. This is Professor Fox signing off. We're going to read a bunch more classics. Coming up will be The Hobbit will be soon. Take care.